Hello, people of the world. Welcome to my first YouTube video. Today I want to share with you some of the knowledge that I have, and that is in how to study to an exam and get a top grade. Um, I just finished my bachelor in software engineering in Denmark a few months ago, and I thought that I wanted to share with you how I received a really good grade in most of all the courses that I had. And the advice that I'm going to give you today, it might be different depending on your university. But my experience is from a Danish university, and it can also be applied, at least I know it can also be applied in Singapore, where I went to exchange. And so I know about those two universities, but it might be that it doesn't apply to all universities. So I want to split up the advice in the teaching and the exam period. So first we have the teaching period, which is the period where there is lectures, and my recommendation is to focus on the slides that are provided for the lectures, because what I found is that the information that is examined in the exam is usually all in the lecture slides. And I think the reason for this is that usually when the professor is done with the course and he needs to do an exam and make an exam for the students, he usually goes back to his lecture slides and look at what is written in these lecture slides. And from what he's written in these lecture slides, he decides what to ask in the exam questions. So I think the lecture slides is really useful to go through. I will say that in many courses, the quality of the lectures themselves is generally quite low and quite bad. So this means that you should instead focus on going through the slides before the lecture, and maybe even deciding not to attend the lecture if that can spare you some time. Yes. And then there's the weekly exercises. What I would recommend is generally to go through the lecture slides and then try to do the weekly exercises. And if you find that these weekly exercises are difficult, I would then attend the TAing session and ask the questions that you have. But the smart thing about doing it before is that you can prepare all the questions that you have beforehand, and then hijack a teaching assistant and then ask all of the questions that you have, and even cross-check your answers for all of the weekly exercises. So that is really a smart hack that I've used several times. Yes, and then also I would recommend quite early in the semester to actually find some of the exam sets and try to see which of these questions that you are able to answer already. If the questions are regarding some part of the curriculum that you haven't had yet, then of course you can skip them. But otherwise, going through the exam sets and trying to answer some of these questions early on will give you a very good overview into what kind of questions are asked for the exam, because this is what will ultimately matter the most. So then there is the exam period. And the exam period is the time after the official lectures, and during this period students usually just spend time reading and preparing for the exams. And then how do you actually prepare for the exam? Which is also a really important part in order to get a good grade for the exam. Of course, some courses have split out the evaluation such that some of the grade is based on projects. So if that is the case, then of course you need to focus on these as well. And but what I find is that the principles that I apply for preparing for the exams can also be applied for doing good projects during the semester. So the way that I would recommend preparing for the exam during the exam period, that you go through all of the slides again that the lecturer has shared with you. What I usually do is I compile all the PDFs from the slides into one big PDF, such that I can search all of the content and generally just go through all of the slides as one big PDF. I'll share in the description how you can use something called Cider Console. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but you can use this to merge all of the slides together so that you just have one big PDF for each course, and I would really recommend that. Also, one thing I want to mention, when you read the slides, you have to think of it like you take the role of the lecturer and actually try to explain the slides to yourself, because you know that if you are able to explain the slide or what is in the slide to yourself, then you know that you've understood the topic really well. This is probably not something that applies if you just want to pass the course, but if you really want to get a top grade, I really would recommend that you try to explain all of the topics of the course to yourself. I usually start the exam period by doing a few of the exam sets for the course. Then because that gives me a general overview of the level and the kind of questions that are asked for the exam. If you followed my previous advice, you would of course also do that during the teaching period. But if you haven't done that yet, I would definitely recommend that you would do it as the first thing in the exam period, just to get a general overview of the level and the kinds of questions that you are asked for the exam. And then after that, you of course reread the slides and then explain them to yourself. And because you know that if you're able to explain them to yourself, you also understand the topic very well. This mostly applies if you really want to get a top grade. And if you're not interested in this, of course, following this probably won't be necessary. But then the next thing I would recommend is that you redo all of the weekly exercises, all of the work sets that you have been given throughout the semester. And once if you've done all of those, you should at this point be really well understanding of the entire curriculum of the course, and you should be able to be well prepared. And then at this point, you want to test how well prepared you are. And this is why I would want to save some of the exam sets to after this, so that at this point you can now test how well you understand the topics by going through some of the exam sets now that you have really prepared well for the topics. Here it helps a lot if there are solutions available for the previous exams, such that you can check if your answers to the exam really are correct, because it doesn't help you that much if you just try and answer all the questions if you don't know if you've answered all of them wrong. So I would definitely try to check if there's a solution. If for some courses it might be that there are no solutions available. In that case, I would definitely team up with the other students and try to share the solutions that you've developed for the previous exams. And here it is also really helpful to check through their answers, both to help them, but also to check if you would have answered the same and compare them to their answers. Because in the case that you have different answers, then it's really helpful to go ahead and discuss with that person what is the right answer, and try to convince the other person why your answer is correct, and make the other person do the same, such that you will hopefully end up with the correct answer. Now that's my advice for the teaching period and the exam period. And if you are really if you have a really short time and you really need to perform a lot, and you need to get a lot of work done in a very short time, then I also have some extra tips for you, just to get the maximum potential out of your hours. And I will warn you that this is probably not for everyone, and these tips is not at all needed for anyone. But if you're really short on time, I would recommend applying these. And it's actually a really simple tip that I usually do when I really need to push myself. And it's actually a little bit funny, because my advice in order to push yourself is actually to not push yourself. And what I mean by this is that we only have a limited amount of willpower, and if we use up our willpower, we will just burn out. So that is not helpful at all, to just push through and try to do something that we're not motivated to do. Instead, I want to turn it around and say, okay, how can we make this goal that we're trying to achieve more motivating? So in order to do that, it is often helpful to ask yourself why you're trying to achieve this goal, why you're trying to get a good grade, and what will a poor grade, how will that affect you, and how will that affect your future career? So really ask yourself why you're doing this. Because it is by asking the questions of why that we find out why we do things, and also help ourselves motivate in doing things. Another tip that I would recommend is also actually not spending our attention on useless stuff. So what we usually do in our day-to-day lives is that we spend our attention on a lot of unusable things, at least in the relation to getting a good grade. Of course, the whole life is not about getting a good grade, but if you want to really focus on that one goal, you also need to be aware that you want all of your attention to go towards that. And in order to do that, you really need to try to cut out anything else that might take your attention. And the way that I usually do this is I don't want to push myself. So I just tell myself that the only thing that I can spend energy on is things that will get me closer to my goal. So I allow myself to take breaks and sit and do nothing. But during these breaks, and this is a really important part, that during these breaks, I don't do anything else. I only relax, and I only sit and I look up in the ceiling, and I really do nothing. because when we are actually boring our brain in this way, we will really fast regain our motivation to go ahead and do something with our brain. Because it's really interesting when you try this the first time, because it is really an extreme effect that it has, because our brain is so used to getting attention all the time. And when we deprive our brain from this attention, it will just suddenly feel so bored, and all of this boredom will drive it back to doing whatever gets you closer to your goal. So this is a really powerful technique. It is not a technique that I would recommend using for prolonged periods of time, but it is a really powerful technique that you can apply when you really have that one goal that you want to accomplish, and there is and it's really important for you. Then I will also give an advice regarding the general routine and also exercise. What I do is I actually exercise every day, but I do it for a relatively short period of time. What I do is I wake up and I work throughout the day. I have set times throughout the day where I do have breaks and I have lunch, so I don't have to worry about when to have the lunch break. And then I also have a set time where I will usually finish, and this is where I put in my workout. And this workout is usually just a short 5 kilometer run, and during this workout, it's also the reason why I do the run as a workout is that it's really doesn't require a lot of mind to perform the workout. And because of this, it allows me to relax my brain while I'm working out and getting oxygen out to my entire body. And then if I'm really busy, when I'm finished working out, I'll just do some easy tasks during the evening, because at this time of day my brain is usually super fried, and this means that I'm not really able to do anything super hard. So instead I'll usually go through the slides for the course and just look at them and try to explain them to myself. So, because this is usually something that doesn't require that much attention to do. Yes, that was the last advice that I had. I hope that you like this kind of content, and if you have any suggestions or anything, or about what you want to hear more about, and then you can post a comment and tell me what you would like to know. I don't know everything, but I'll try to do my best to answer your questions. Yes, and you know the drill, right? It's about subscribing and liking and something with a bell. Yeah, just do that if you feel like you like what I'm doing. And I hope to see you again. Goodbye.